Kia ora koutou, Marky here. So I am on the beach. I'd hope to give you a nice kind of sea view, but it's quite difficult to hold the phone that way, so I'll let me give you a little look. It's not the most picturesque of the beaches around these parts. It's quite near a kind of industrial area, but it's it's nice. I quite like it. Yeah, I'm going to hold the phone in a different way. So you see the gulls behind me, hopefully, and you get some nice blue sky. It's quite cold actually, because it's still kind of spring here and it hasn't really warmed up yet, but it's starting to warm up. So I want to return to a series that I started a long time ago, and it's called Social Skills for Aspies and Askies. Okay, so I'm going to do a little kind of refresher on a recap on what that series is about, because I've not done any on that topic for a while. So Aspies, that means Asperger's, people that have Asperger's syndrome, which is no longer called Asperger's syndrome, but the name's kind of stuck. And Askies because that's a term that I've invented, which comes from ASC, Autistic Spectrum Condition. Now you might be saying it's not ASC, Marky, it's ASD, Autistic Spectrum Disorder, and it is in the medical manuals, but I would argue that it's not necessarily a disorder, although it brings challenges, it also brings gifts. So it's a condition, it's a difference. So that's when we talk about neurodiversity, diverse meaning varied and different. So it's not necessarily shouldn't really be looked at as a problem or as a disadvantage, just as a difference that brings good and it brings bad. One of the things that often in terms of bad that being on the autistic spectrum can bring is difficulty with all kinds of social interaction. Not just kind of social skills, but a big kind of thing for a lot of people is difficulty in reading social cues and non-verbal cues, and particularly facial expressions. So I wanted to talk about that, and there is I do have a kind of solution here, which is kind of quite nice. So it's nice to have a solution, and of course, and I'm very aware at the moment that certainly where I am, we're all wearing masks. This is my that's why I've got this, so I can mask up very quickly at a moment's notice if anyone comes into close contact. There are lots of gangs here, and apparently this is the colour of one of the local gangs. So when I wear this, it's quite interesting. People move out of my way and things like that. So that's quite. I'm not gang affiliated. So yeah, with masks it's even harder to read people's faces. So what I'm going to say is that for most neurotypical people, reading faces comes very naturally. It's a very instinctual thing that people don't really have to think about. But for a lot of people on the autistic spectrum, it's a mystery. It means nothing, and that's one of the reasons why often people with Askies and Aspies tend to often are known for not using as much eye contact as maybe neurotypical people do, and that's not strictly, that's not 100% true. A lot of people use a lot of eye contact, and we've talked about that in other videos, but one of the reasons is if we can't read faces, then why do we need to look at people when we're talking to them? Most of why would we look them in the eye? We want to concentrate on the words, on the verbal communication. So it doesn't come naturally. That doesn't mean we can't do it, because it can be learned, and there are some very good ways of learning it. And I've been getting into body language. I've always been interested in body language, but it's one of those things that I've never really been able to kind of engage with in books. I've never really enjoyed books on body language, and as you know, I'm a great YouTube fan. I watch far more YouTube videos than I ever make, and I've been watching lots on body language. Okay, and people kind of talk about body language. Usually when they talk about body language, they're also including kind of behavioural analysis, and that does include speech, not just kind of speech patterns and tone and cadence and things like that, but also the words that people use. So it's kind of a bit of it fits within a broader spectrum of interest. I've been watching body language videos for quite a long time. And as one does with this kind of thing, you get more discerning. So I've kind of narrowed my kind of repertoire, my menu, if you like, of body language videos that I watch. I've kind of narrowed them down to probably 3 channels that I think are really good. Okay, and I'm going to put a link in the description to the channel. If it's not there yet, don't worry, because it takes me ages to get around to things. They will be there eventually. And I will name them. Although one of them I can't remember the name of, so I'll name 2. The reason I like these channels is that there's a much higher kind of standard of analysis with these ones. I mean, one of the things that they're often talking about, they often criticise what they call absolute body language readers, because what they would mean by absolute body language readers is that they say if somebody does X, it means Y. So a common one is to say, if somebody scratches their nose, they're lying. But it can be one sign of deception, but it's not. The kind of the people that I watch now that I think are brilliant. They're often picking up on things like that. You're looking for clusters of various different indicators before you can make any kind of analysis. You can't make assumptions based on one gesture or one movement. So I'll put the links there. I heartily recommend these channels. So let me talk about the channels. So my favourite one is the Behaviour panel, which is they bill it as 4 of the world's top experts on body language, and I don't think they're kidding. So quite a few of them are kind of senior, ex-military, senior military interrogators and police interrogators, and one of the guys on the panel, who's the only British guy, Mark Bowden, is neurodiverse himself, which I find kind of really quite reassuring. I've talked about that in another video. I think I've actually released that video where I've talked about him. So they really know their stuff, and you've got 4 of them. You've got 4 views for the price of one, and they really. What's really nice, they've got a really good chemistry between them. They bounce off one another. Sometimes they disagree. More often they agree, but they're very respectful of one another, and they all come from a slightly different perspective. Some of them, bring more psychology into it. So really useful. What they do is they'll show the typical kind of format for one of their shows is they'll go through a series of videos, break them down into smaller clips, play them, then talk about them, and they play them again, which is really good. So you can kind of watch again having been enlightened, and you can kind of pick up what they're seeing, which often I don't see at all. Sometimes they pick up things I think, I'm not seeing that at all. And there's another one called all these things on the tip of my tongue until I do a video, and then I forget the name. I think it's called was it the Body Language Man? Yeah, not sure if that's the name of the channel. So it's a guy who I don't know where he's actually from. He's from, I think, South or Central America, and he's called Jesus Enrique Rosa. It took me a long time to kind of get my head around his name, because he says it very fast, but then we started using subtitles and I was fine with that. He's really good as well. And there's another one, and this is the one that I can't remember, and it's an American guy, and he's doing some kind of academic course in body language analysis. So all these people are really astute. There's a lot of other people out there that just that aren't good, really, and they're very biased. They tend to form an opinion, and they don't like someone, and they'll kind of see all the negatives, and they say, this person's lying, and this is a sign that they're this, and a sign that they're that. So what have I learned? Well, probably quite a lot. I'm not going to go into a lot of it here. I'm going to really just cover the basics. So the most important thing about body language analysis is baseline. Okay. So for example, a tongue jut, which is where you might do that, often is a sign of disgust or rejection, or that you don't like something. And the theory behind it is that as babies, people tend to put things in our mouths as babies. They feed us with things. Sometimes we like it, sometimes we don't. The easiest way to push food out of your mouth if you don't like it is to do that. But some people just do that all the time, naturally. So you should never just make assumptions on the basis of that one behaviour. So the idea is, you would spend as much time as you can observing the habits of an individual. And then what you're looking for is difference, is what's different. If they're doing tongue juts all the time, it's probably kind of fairly meaningless. But if they never do it, and then they do it at a particular point, then that's possibly telling you something. But even then, so the first thing is baseline. The second thing is clusters, which I did mention earlier. And there's different kinds of body language. So one kind of body language is an illustrator. An illustrator is where you use gestures and movements and facial expressions, things like that, to help to tell your story and to illustrate the point you're going to make. I don't really use them a lot. I use a lot of facial expressions, I suppose. I don't know. I think it has been said, and I don't know if this is true, that people on the autistic spectrum often gesticulate less than neurotypical people. I'd be interested to know if that is true, if anyone can enlighten me on that. So you've got illustrators. Now, one of the things that's a good sign that somebody's telling the truth is that their illustrators are in sync with what they're saying. If their illustrators are out of sync with what they're saying. So in other words, if there used to be an advert that said if the wash says hot but the label says not. So if the voice, the words are saying one thing but the body seems to be saying another, that can be a sign of deception, which is one of the things you can look for in body language. It's not all about that. That's, the body language is about all sorts of things. So some of these illustrators, are they in sync with what they're saying, or does it feel like you're getting two different messages? So that's one thing to be aware of. The other kind of key kind of body language is what they call adjusters, which is a way of diffusing energy, really, which emotion, I suppose, is a better way of putting it. But emotion is energy, really, isn't it? Emotion kind of like energy. Emotion has to kind of do something and go somewhere. So we're constantly letting off steam. We're releasing tension. Because the word express, which we use to, as in expressions, facial expressions, what we say, expressing ourselves with gestures, means to push out. So we often use movements of body language as a way of letting go of emotions, moving them on. E is energy, as in E equals E mc squared, the Einstein thing. E, motion, energy and motion. So emotions aren't a still thing, they're a moving thing, which is why the kind of depression is almost like a kind of frozen emotion. So adapters are a way of so they can be self-comforting. So there are certain gestures that people use that are kind of reassuring. Sometimes a lot of any kind of self-touching or rubbing is a kind of reassuring thing for the most part. But other movements and gestures are a way of expressing all kinds of things, and that's what body language is all about. That's what you're reading, is the things that the expressions that are non-verbal, and you can learn to interpret them. But you have to distinguish them from the illustrators, because the illustrators are a different kind of thing, really. Illustrators are much more about, this is how I'm telling my story. It's not entirely conscious, but it's closer to consciousness than adapters, which are much more unconscious. So that's kind of the bare bones of it, really. So you can learn it, and there's tons of books that, you know, I don't get on particularly well with reading books on body language, because I find it far better for it to be illustrated, you know, to have a video and somebody tell me what somebody's doing at the time. I find that really good. So check them out, and I'll put links to some of these channels in the description box below. And check out the rest of the series. So you know, I put this series together based on my personal experience. I'm on the autistic spectrum, and, you know, experiences of other people that I've been with, and sometimes quite unpleasant experiences I've had of being around people who are on the autistic spectrum, who say and do things that are quite unpleasant, quite difficult, that don't facilitate a good connection or a good conversation, or that are quite, you know, off-putting, sometimes really offensive. So that's what this channel is for, really. It's a genuine educational resource for people who are on the spectrum who want to improve their communication and their relationships and their interactions with other people, and don't necessarily know what's getting in the way. So there's a whole bunch of different things that we've covered. So yeah, if you can't read, so when I say body language, and I started off by talking about facial expressions. Facial expressions are the biggest part of body language, really, because we do so much with our faces. That's why my face is so wrinkled and grizzled as it is, because it's been expressing things for over 50 years, you know, so it's not a surprise, really. So facial expressions and body language is the same thing, you know, but obviously body language is wider. It does include the whole body. I'm doing more illustrators now, since I've been talking about illustrators. I'm doing this kind of windmilly thing with my left hand. I don't know quite why I'm doing that. And I'm scratching my nose now, which doesn't mean I'm lying. And there's an interesting, you know, physiological connection. So these guys, particularly the behaviour panel, they often give a physiological reason why, you know, when we're feeling vulnerable, we'll adopt a certain posture, and things like that. And there's often a biological, evolutionary, psychological reason why we do that, because it might protect vital organs, or it makes our jugular vein less easy for a predator to get to, and things like that. So really interesting stuff, fascinating, and I think it's something you can go on learning forever, really. It's not an exact science. I think it's more of a it's probably more of an art than a science, but there's certainly some science in it, despite what some people will tell you. So don't despair. You know, if you feel like you're missing out on a lot of nuances, and you kind of get confused by people's communication, because maybe they're saying something and you're taking it on a very literal, direct level, but, you know, something else is going down, but you don't know quite what it is. This is one way to get around that, and to improve your awareness, and it's fun, you know. It's interesting. You can read people, you can watch politicians on television and kind of think, oh yeah, I think, there's something sus going on there. So check it out, enjoy, have fun, and I will be back with some more. I want to do something for Halloween, actually, because that's coming up soon, although I might end up posting the Halloween one before I post this one, so maybe we won't talk about that. So thank you for watching. Let's give you a final shot of the beach. We've got a big ship coming in, and Rangi Mario.